Buenos dias, church. Good morning. My name is Donny Priborsky, and I'm a friend of First Church living in Mexico. I'm living in the beautiful city of Querétaro. Querétaro is spelled capital Q-U-E-R, E with an accent, T-A-R-O. Querétaro. Querétaro. Querétaro is a beautiful colonial city, 3 hours north of Mexico City on the bus. I've been living here since August of last year, and I'm teaching music to undergraduates here in Querétaro, as well as community members. Some of you may know me because for the Liturgy of Pentecost at First Church, several of my students and I share with you some of our music. We sang the Gregorian chant for Pentecost, which is Veni Creator Spiritus, and then my students share with you the beautiful and famous Mexican song, Cielito Lindo. My dear friend Molly, our pastor, has asked me to share with you a spiritual story. And the story has to do with what I'm beginning to intuit is God's economy. Maybe many of you know the word economy comes from a Greek word which means care of the home. And the great Brazilian theologian Leonardo Boff, one of the mothers and fathers of the Latin American liberation theology, has said many times over the last 40 years that our number one responsibility is to see ourselves as brothers and sisters, all of us human beings, in our common home, the planet. So economy, in his sense, is to care for our common home, the entire planet, and all the people who live in the common home, our brothers and sisters who are human and our non-human brothers and sisters. So the economy that I think is God's economy is very different from our capitalist, consumerist, globalized economy that prizes money and power and prestige over everything else. I, like many of you, have been affected by the pandemic, and I've been in severe financial straits for a while now. I'm living hand to mouth. Many times I've come up with just 1 peso or no pesos and had to ask for help. The latest time this happened to me was just last week when I was at my wit's end because I've lost so many classes because people here don't have the money anymore to take piano lessons or to pay for university fees. So last Thursday, a week ago, I was just with no pesos whatsoever. And I thought, okay, what do I do now? Who do I ask for help? And I remember a while back that Molly had said to me that First Church has an emergency fund for anyone who considers themselves a part of the First Church community, and that if I ever needed to ask for help, I should freely ask for it. At the time, I really appreciated her suggestion, but I thought I didn't want to abuse of my friendship with your community, or I should say our community, so I didn't ask. But last week, I realized this was the time to finally ask for help from First Church. And I asked Molly for money for 2 reasons. To pay for a new bike, because my bike had been stolen 2 months ago and I've had no money to replace it, and to pay for the lawyer's fees for my work permit, which has been stuck in process for a while. So I asked Molly for $400, and within an hour, the money was here in Mexico through Western Union. And the very next day, I bought my bike for $250 with a really strong bike lock. And then a week later, yesterday, I gave the lawyer his fee for the second to last step for my work visa process. And that was $100. And I was left with $50, which then I spent for things like renewing my cell phone plan and buying toothpaste and things like that. So how does God's economy fit into all this? Well, 2 things. You know how the Holy Spirit is, Molly. So literally 10 minutes ago, before coming to this cafe to make this recording, a woman came up to me at the gate of our apartment complex, and she was a dark-skinned Mexican woman with her dark-skinned children. And just like in the United States, people with darker skin are at the bottom of the hierarchical structure, and they are suffering the consequences. And she asked me in Spanish if I had any clothes to give to her and her children. I was in a hurry to come to the cafe, and I brushed her off. And then as I started walking, I thought, wait a minute, I'm going to write a spiritual story about how I was given a gift. I think I should go back and ask her what she needs. I went back, and she told me what she needed. And I said, no, there's no problem. I went into my house and found a bunch of clothes that I've not worn in quite a while. And I came out and gave it to her. And she said to me in Spanish, que Dios te pague. May God pay you back. I said, no, God's already paid me back. I had no money at all last week, nothing. And God paid me back before I even gave you the clothes. Listen to how God's economy is. Well, there's another part to the story. The reason I'm connected to your community, our community, is that I was the music director at the Catholic Church of All Saints Parish in Hayward for 9 years, until 2016. And though I love the parish and I made many friends and I love the pastor and I love the priest who helped us out, there was a bitter taste in my mouth because the reactionaries that have complete control of a Catholic institution are like some of those disciples of Jesus, even in his time. They're doing everything they can to keep Jesus away from people. And so the sacraments in the Catholic institution have walls around them, and these same disciples, 2,000 years later, are trying to keep people away from Jesus. The same thing, though Jesus was open to and listened to the people who are most despised and marginalized and learned from them. I'm thinking of the prostitute that washed his feet and the Syrophoenician woman and blind Bartimaeus, and you can name so many of these people. The same reactionaries in the Catholic Church, just like Jesus' disciples, are trying to keep all those people away from Jesus and not listen to them. So in the Catholic Church, even though I love my community, there was no way I could hear women speak or openly GLBTQ or non-binary people speak. There was no way I could see women or GLBTQ and non-binary people in positions of authority. And divorced and married people couldn't receive the sacraments. The list goes on and on. So in my frustration, I started thinking, I don't want to give up my job because I depend on it, but I want to find a church where I can go and experience the sacraments that are freely given, just as Jesus freely gave himself, and where I can hear anyone reflect on their relationship with Jesus, just like Jesus listened to everyone that came up to him. So I started to look in the internet for a church that had a service, say around 11 in the morning, and that was in the East Bay. And I thought, well, if I can pay for a sub to cover my second to last Mass at 11 o'clock, and then find volunteers to cover my last Mass at 12:30, then maybe once a month I can go to hopefully a progressive Protestant church that can feed me in a way that no Catholic church can. And lo and behold, who showed up on the internet search? First Church of Berkeley. So I found someone to sub for me, and I paid him $100, and I found a substitute volunteer for my last Mass, and I showed up at First Church. This would probably be 2013. In community, church, I fell in love with your community. With you, I experienced the things I was longing and hungering for, that all churches that are communities of Jesus should offer. And unfortunately, the Catholic Church's institution cannot offer it. And so then faithfully for the next 2 years, once a month, I paid anywhere from $100 to $120 to cover a sub to come and worship with you. And I always put $20 in the collection basket, which for me as a musician is a lot of money. So when I think about it, for those 2 years, I spent several $1,000s just to go and worship in your community. Obviously, I was being fed by you, so paying the money was worth it. Well, one time I was sitting in the pew and I filled out your welcome form, and what do I receive but a week later? A beautiful email from our beloved Pastor Molly. And she said, "What are you doing here as a music director at All Saints Church in Hayward?" And I wrote her back and said, "Well, I love your community so much. I'm like maybe a United Church Christ person also, as well as a Catholic." So she invited me to have coffee with her, and that began our wonderful friendship that has continued until today. So God's economy. I spent all that money to come and worship in our community at First Church, not thinking of the cost. It was a big sacrifice for me because musicians don't make money. But the spiritual payoff was tremendous. And lo and behold, in my moment of economic need, who steps in? You do. I have a beautiful bike, a strong bike lock. I paid for my lawyer. My cell phone plan is paid. And I know that if I were to ask for more help, I would receive it. Isn't that funny? I spent all that money, including the $20 I put in the collection basket all those years ago, and how it's come back in ways I could never have known or ever planned. And how funny that your gift to me came and kept flowing, because I ran into this woman today who was needing clothes, and I went out and gave it to her and told her, well, I had nothing, and now I can share. And she says, well, isn't that what we all need to do? We all got to help out one another. Isn't that what Leonardo Wolff is saying? No, this is our common home, economy, to care for our home. So we got to care for each other. When we have extra, let's share it. And when we need to receive, let's ask. So I hope that all of us can learn to have that kind of freedom of spirit that Jesus kept trying to share with us. and all of us who are from San Francisco, that we can learn from the example of our beloved brother Francis of Assisi, because he did the same thing. He gave everything up, and yet it came back to him in spades in so many ways. So I wish you blessings on this Sunday, and I hope that you all can continue to participate in God's beautiful economy. Hasta luego y bendiciones.